Hello and welcome to Myth, Magic, and Movies. And today we are going to be taking a look at three tragic Greek heroes. Now, this is an episode I've been really excited about doing because previous episodes we mostly been focusing on the supernatural and horror. So this will be our chance to talk about Greek mythology for a change. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know how we're doing down in the comments below. And as always, thank you for tuning in, and let's get started. So today I have with me a previous guest. I've got Matthew Johnson here, based out of California. He is a writer and publisher, and he is a Greek mythology aficionado. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Excellent. So we've had this plan for quite a while. What I wanted to talk about today are three tragic heroes in Greek mythology, and and some of these are names that people are familiar with, and others are names you would have to be a diehard classicist to know who they are. And they are Oedipus of Thebes, Ajax, a hero in the Trojan War, and Bellerophon, who most people may not know that much about. But if you've heard of Pegasus, then you'll be surprised to learn how he played a role in helping bring Pegasus into the limelight of Greek mythology. So, Matt, I just wanted to start off. So in terms of your of Greek mythology, how did you get into it, and how did you kind of develop a fascination with these stories?
Basically, when it came to ancient Greece and Rome, because at first, when I was at college, I started off as a pre-veterinary major, and then I'm like, nah, I can't do the science stuff. I'm like, it. My grades were not that great in it, but I'm like, you know what? I love writing. I love reading. And so when I switched my major, I actually started doing, because writing was my focus. So I really started studying like Latin and Greek history because the histories there are so fascinating, dealing with how people rose to power and how they fell apart so fast. Like you can have such a great climb and then you do one thing and it all falls apart. And so as part of that minor, we actually had to study the Greek mythology and the mythos there. And so I had to like memorize like all these myths for this class, basically called myth and literature.
Was there a particular myth that stood out to you that kind of resonated with you?
There are so many different myths that always stand out to me. I mean, you have the Ovid's Metamorphoses, because, you know, Kafka's Metamorphoses. But just the whole idea of punishment from the gods for whatever reasons they find suitable that we as humans can't really comprehend, just because we're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or we make a choice to do something and they're like, no, we don't want you involved with that. So too bad, you're turned into a stag. Boom. Now you're going to be killed by your dogs. or
you're tied to a mountain where an eagle eats your liver every day.
Oh, yes.
You know? I mean, what's also interesting is the fact that because originally when I first started learning Greek mythology, the idea what I was taught was that the Greeks were trying to find reasons to explain how the world worked, because they were living in an era where, you know, understanding of the natural world was far more limited than what we have today. But that didn't mean that there were certain philosophers who were trying to answer those questions. But
well, yeah, I mean, the philosophers actually had way more knowledge than what we give them credit for. The understanding of, like, for myths are basically to help to understand the values of that culture and that society. So every time we read a story, we got to think about, okay, what's being presented to us? And that tells us what those people cared about the most. And so, because they're like, yeah, they can explain things, but sometimes they served often as like a warning, like, don't you go off and steal fire from the gods, otherwise, and you're going to be punished because you're getting too big for your britches there.
But and that's true. But it's also kind of lets you know that there is that there's a moral aspect in the way that we interact with one another too, because, you know, as much as we love the stories about how, you know, humans piss off the gods and the gods kind of punish them, it also kind of lets us know, you know, hey, you know, it's very important to understand that there are certain things that you can and cannot do with your fellow man.
Yes.
So starting off, I wanted to begin with Oedipus, because that's one character that probably most people will be familiar with, even if they're not entirely well versed in the story.
Hmm.
Um, so as we know, Oedipus is famous for solving the riddle of the Sphinx, who was
Yep.
terrorizing the city of Thebes, and as a reward, he is awarded the hand of Jocasta.
Hmm.
And by Jocasta, he ends up having 4 kids, 2 girls and 2 sons. Um, but later on, a plague falls upon Thebes, and Oedipus, as the king, is tasked with trying to figure out what's the cause of it.
Yep.
And in Oedipus Rex, there is a wonderful scene where he confronts Tiresias, the
Oh
seer.
yeah. Yeah.
And well, I'll let you pick up from there, Matt, because I know it looks like you're itching to tell the story here.
I mean, I always find it fascinating that the seer himself is blind, and how it's like the idea of like losing his, like not having his sight there, give him this foresight into the future there, and how he's basically like, I don't really want to tell you what's going on, I don't want to, and it's like this whole idea of, I know what's going to happen, and yet you're compelling me to push you towards this tragedy, this tragic ending. And as we all know, obviously the discovery was that, oh, he actually murdered his father and he married his mom. And but it's all by happenstance, because he himself was supposed to be killed as a child. And since he was cast out, he was tasked with and was raised basically by, shepherds, which I always find fascinating because shepherds raise a lot of heroes.
Right, right. Well, there's also a lot of there's a pastoral element to them because
Hmm.
because you'll remember Romulus and Remus,
Yep.
after they were being suckled by the she wolf, they were found by shepherds. And
Hmm.
we can even apply the theme to Christianity, where Jesus,
Manger. Yep.
yeah, the manger, and he uses metaphors like "I am the good shepherd," and
Hmm.
most of his ministry, is set in a pastoral landscape in Galilee. So, it's so fascinating because and I want to get your thoughts on this too, because the idea of the shepherd in the pastoral landscape is this sort of idea of innocence, of living in a world without corruption. So
Oh.
Oedipus, he starts off as this pure figure, but then when he enters Thebes and
Mm.
becomes part of the city environment, he slowly becomes corrupted. I mean, obviously the first part of it is it's incest.
Yeah.
And it leads to a bunch of unsavory behavior where he basically acts like a dick to Tiresias, and he acts like a dick to Creon, and
Yep.
then we know what ends up happening. He just learns the truth, and then he blinds himself. So, but yeah, what do you think about the whole pastoral shepherd imagery?
Hang on. My dogs are deciding to serenade a delivery guy. They, yeah, no matter what. Hush, guys. So basically, when it comes down to it, I don't think the pastoral is always. Oh, hang on.
So
Oh, there we go. So I don't think the pastoral world is always the innocence, because there's always the danger, the wolf that's lurking without there. And yeah, they escape society and able to hang out with the sheep and raising in nature. But eventually, those sheep sometimes got to be slaughtered for food and clothing. So
that's true. That's true. But but there's also something very interesting about the fact that when Oedipus first starts off, he comes off as this heroic figure who
yes.
is able to defeat the Sphinx. And what's interesting too, because most Greek heroes that we're familiar with, the way that they defeat their enemies is by force.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, Theseus. Is it Theseus who has the club, or is it Heracles? I forget.
Heracles is a club.
Okay,
Theseus is the sword and shield.
because as we know, Theseus he famously kills the Minotaur,
Yep.
and then Hercules obviously goes on his 12 labors and he uses his club.
Hmm.
But even someone like Odysseus, who's famous for his intellect, he's
Yes.
been known to use weapons, now and then. Obviously, being a veteran of the Trojan War, I mean, he's obviously going to use weapons to fight the Trojans. But there's also but there's also what was it, a stick or a spike that he uses to blind the Cyclops
Yeah.
in the cave.
But that was more about he's trying to be clever. I mean, they always called him, compared him to a fox, and his
Right.
cleverness. Yeah. So very much in that way, they always seem to outsmart themselves, though.
Right, but what I'm getting at is that Theseus, for the most part, you rarely see him in a situation where he has to resort to force.
No.
Like he's using his
Yeah.
wits, and that's what, and I'll admit that's what I find admirable about him, is because he's able to prove himself the hero without having to resort to, to violence of any kind, well, weapons of any kind. So where I was, so obviously the title of this episode is Tragic Heroes. I
Yes.
mean, we know that the tragedy of Theseus is the fact, not Theseus, of Oedipus.
Oedipus.
Yeah,
Yes.
is the fact that he ends up having to lose everything because of the discovery of what he did.
Yeah.
First to his dad when he realizes, oh, the guy at the crossroads that I got into a fight to and killed, that wasn't just a rando.
Nope.
That was my birth dad.
Yep.
And the woman with whom I have 4 children. I mean, I mean, my God. I mean, I don't think even George R. R. Martin could have could have gone that far. I mean, brother and sister,
Right.
fine, but sons and mothers, no, not even touching that
Yeah.
with the 10-foot pole. But
It's also very Egyptian too. So, because the Egyptians, the pharaohs would marry off, close relatives, because they thought they're gods, so they gotta do and be what the gods were. But here in the Greek ideology is that all the gods are the gods and we're humans. We gotta actually follow what's right in our own society and not betray the natural order of things.
But you bring up a very good point, Matthew, because because with the Egyptians there is that divine mentality. So it's that notion where they've already set themselves apart from humanity by declaring, well, we're just not like you peons. I mean, we're obviously better than you. So what we do is far more acceptable than what you guys are doing. With Oedipus, there really isn't that separation. I mean, yes, he's a king, and everybody else are just citizens of the polis. But but in a way, Oedipus is still acknowledging that yes, we are all Greeks and we are still humans. He's not putting himself on a different on a god tier, so to speak, from than the rest of humanity. So but what I find so fascinating too about Oedipus is the fact that a lot of the things that he does, he's making his own decisions. It's not like Creon or anybody or Tiresias are holding a dagger to his throat and saying, "Hey, you got to go this route because if you don't, then this won't happen."
But he's also a fate of the social the morals there, and the law. Because if you look at it, the women don't have agency, and because the women don't have agency, his mother is actually presented as a trophy, a gift, but it's like the gift with a poison needle inside.
Yeah, exactly. It's a double-edged sword. Well, let me ask you about this because you're familiar with the prophecy that that his dad was presented, right?
Yes.
So here's my thing, and if you're not able to answer the question, that's fine. So Oedipus's dad is made aware that if he has a son with Jocasta, that boy's going to kill him. So he's got to do everything he can to kind of make sure that doesn't happen, which in a weird, twisted way kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Oedipus, he at any point he could have let's say for instance, instead of walking down the right road, he could have taken the left road instead. He could have made any decision at any point in his life to kind of negate the the efficacy of that prophecy. Do you think that prophecy is conditional, or is it sort of set in stone, like it's predetermined?
It's predetermined because they're just like in because
Well,
very common.
I guess predetermined is not the best way to phrase it, but you probably get where I'm going here.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, in that society, especially with a lot of heroes, like for like even Theseus, they send him away to be raised by a shepherd. Like, well, if he's meant to be a hero, then he'll prove himself, and
Hmm.
he does. He moves a rock, picks up the sword, and goes on an adventure, and like pretends to be like he's Heracles and going off and killing all the people to get where he needs to go. But Oedipus there, he ends up with kind of like the opposite version of that. He was cursed to start with, and it's like why did the gods choose him to be cursed? Like what has he done to be punished in such a way?
But there's another thing too that kind of stands out because when we were discussing our fascination with Greek mythology earlier,
Hmm.
the one thing that kind of stands out is the fact that everybody has free will. It's not like someone. So let's take this for instance, Matthew. If
Yeah.
someone told you you are destined to to blow up a nuclear power plant, would
Hmm.
you would you I mean would you consciously um make decisions to kind of lead you up to that point where you find yourself in front of that reactor button and press it, or would you consciously kind of work your way around to kind of influence events to kind of make sure you don't find yourself in that situation?
Well, if I was forewarned, which he wasn't, if I was forewarned and knew that, then I'd have stay away from all of it. I mean, but sometimes, like in stories, it's more fascinating when the character is unable to escape their fate. They're kind of trapped in this whole world of you have to do this pattern to succeed, and which results later on into the next phase and next steps, which we see what happens with his children, right?
Yeah,
Uh, we see that the whole Antigone aspect that happened there.
in the Seven
Um,
Against Thebes also.
yep, and so it's always fascinating because these heroes they're they're always predestined or cast in a way that they cannot escape being who they are no matter what they do. You could put them out in the wild but they'll be raised by wolves or shepherds, and they'll come back and they won't even know what they're doing, that they're destined to do this. They just do it. And they don't know the consequences of it because no one ever told them. Now, say that his father did raise him and be like, "All right, son, I was told that you're going to kill me one day.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not gonna let you kill me. So you and we're just gonna do our thing, or I'm gonna kill you now and be done with it."
Right, right. But but then that leads to to the next question, because because we did say that all these characters have free will. I mean,
Hmm.
are they really free to make these decisions then, or is there some sort of external force kind of guiding the events, like, or is it just instinct that they do it because they know in their heart they have to do it?
Yeah, I don't. You see the idea. I don't think they all have free will. It's the thing about it is, I think even the Greeks themselves, even though that they think they have this idea that they could shape their destiny in some way, but there's always this element of the gods watching over them, the gods who are helping them along the way, or harming them, or giving them trials to help them grow, or trials to stop them, forestall them. And that's what a lot of the mythos are about. The trials that humanity must overcome, and whatever weakness you have will either end you or you'll grow beyond it.
Right. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, kind of thing. So then Oedipus comes out pretty much as a victim of circumstance, because
Yes,
as you said, this is a guy who didn't stand a chance. He was cursed, from before conception. Um,
exactly.
so that obviously is a tragic thing.
Yep.
To find yourself in a situation where, if you think about it, it's kind of like a Kobayashi Maru from Star Trek. I mean, it's a no-win
Yeah.
scenario, really.
Yeah.
So
I mean, yeah. I mean, honestly, he did everything what he was supposed to do. He thought he was doing the right thing by going out by slaying this bandit and all the leader of the bandit to save and protect people. And he thought he was doing the right thing by marrying the queen and following through with the rules of society at that time. Only to find out that sucks to be you, God's twisted on you.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And I was gonna say too, because as a hero, we kind of only know him for one thing. It's
Hmm.
solving the riddle of the Sphinx, which, like I said earlier, is very admirable because he's using his wits to do that.
Yes.
But I feel like what also kind of makes him heroic in a weird sort of way is the fact that there's almost a nobility in the way in which he kind of handles himself after the fall. Because
Yes.
I read Oedipus at Colonus, and the way he behaves, I mean, he kind of like goes from being some sort of hysterical at one point, but
Hmm.
by the end, it's like he goes to his end with dignity. Um, and as tragic as that is, I would make the argument that that's also very heroic of him as well. Um,
Yeah.
but another thing too is the fact that Oedipus, as well known as the story is, it's not really he's not directly portrayed in popular media, is he? Um,
No, no, definitely. I don't like. I was thinking about all of the characters you gave me, and I'm like thinking, is there anyone who is a direct representation, or even a side representation of who these characters are outside of the stage productions and movies based on stage productions? And I'm like, they don't really touch upon that subject of the fall of mother and son, the relationship. I mean, we could talk about the complex, like, in society in general, in a psychological term, like, yes, boys grow up wanting to kill their fathers and marry their mothers. That's why they go out and find women like them. But that's, like I said, that's Freud's own version of it.
yeah, that's more of
And
a modern take on
yeah,
that. Yeah,
but but I always it's basically showing it's how this is what happens if you break the taboo of society. If you go off and you say that you end up mothers and sons and fathers and daughters having children there, the product of that incest is something that's going to be damned for all of time. I mean, like I said, Antigone picks up on that whole ideology there, and even turns about brings up the idea of justice. Like, is it really, what is justice in this society? And quite often, justice is by who is stronger and who sometimes could be the wisest for the longest, because everybody's going to slip up.
yeah, exactly. Because because as we were discussing this, before and during recording, the only equivalent I can think of is Game of Thrones, really.
Yeah.
But but what they do here is they take the concept of incest, and and they take the characters who engage in it, and they kind of make them the sort of de facto, well, I would say the de
Hmm.
facto villains, but one of the villainous characters,
Yes.
um, which which is which is a very easy thing to do, because obviously if you take a topic that is very much taboo, you want to make the people who engage in it as mean spirited and as depraved as possible. But
Hmm.
but and feel free to interrupt me with your own take at any time, Matthew. I mean,
And
don't
so,
worry about.
unless they're like the Targaryens in his world were exception to that rule, because they were the ones that they were yes, they had the dragons, yes, they were doing and that's more or less to pass down their bloodline, which we would even find it in as early as within a century or so ago, where marriage to close relatives was financial. It came down to, how do we maintain the money here and society, the wealth in the family. So they would marry grandfathers to granddaughters and stuff, and that would happen, but not often, but it would still happen within families.
Yeah, the Habsburgs is definitely one that comes to mind, because I think there was like one queen who was actually the niece of
Yes.
her husband. I think it might have been like Philip II or Philip III
Hmm.
of Spain. But to go back to my Game of Thrones analogy, I would go so far as to say that Jaime Lannister sort of has a sort of Oedipus, you know, or
Yeah.
about him, if you think about it, because if you think about both of these characters are very much heroic in nature. I mean, Oedipus obviously being the man who killed the Sphinx, and Jaime Lannister is a renowned war hero, right?
Yeah.
But but also there as much as we want to point the finger at them and say you guys what you did is very disgusting and you should be reviled, there's a nobility in both of these characters, and the thing that really strikes me is that with Jamie, he as a person, he's not really that bad of a guy, because Cersei, obviously, she's very much this cold, calculating person who just wants to grab as much power as she can. Jamie is far more sympathetic towards the people around him. You're
Except for
making a
when
face,
he
Matt.
dropped little boy from a tower.
Right, right, obviously, yeah,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is that for the most part, he's very much at least trying to live up to the ideals of his society, right?
Yeah, to his father, yeah. But I think
Right,
what ends up in that one, I think in this case, it's more about their. It's not that they're brother. It's more like brother and sisters. It's about their narcissistic attitudes, like they're reflections of each other, and the only people they can love are each other. Which brings us to the myth of Narcissus there, who
yeah.
fell in love with his own image there, which is ancestral in a way because he didn't know who that the image was not him. So, and that's what I always bring that up to back to that myth there, which I always find like how fantasy and anything like in our modern films that pull from these myths or will pull these little elements from it to
Mhm.
add in, and we can see the reflection of those the myths in these stories there.
So
So,
so let me ask you this then, because now you brought up narcissist. Um, in this case, do you think there was a bit of a narcissistic element in Oedipus?
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for I think that he saw himself as the only savior. That he's the only one who could do this, and so that was part of his hubris and helped bring him down. It was like, I'm the one who has to do this. I'm the only one who can do this. I did this thing. I solved the riddle of the Sphinx there. I killed the bandits there. I did all these things. I deserve this.
Hmm. But even when he got together with Jocasta and
Mhm.
they had their family, I can't help but wonder if he thought she was a mere reflection of him in some way as well.
I always wondered that too. It's like, did she not look at him and be like, "Hey, you look familiar"?
Yeah, I mean, hey, you kind of look like my dead husband in a weird sort of way. It's
Yeah.
funny how these things work. And the Oedipus probably would have been like, I've often dreamt about you, many, many nights, before. I mean,
Yeah.
you, I mean, you are the woman of my dreams, not realizing, hey, these are probably memories. These are probably memories of him as a child, bonding with
Yeah.
her.
Right.
But
Like, are you mommy? No, no. Okay.
I mean,
Mm.
that's a very interesting thing to point out. Well, another thing that I would even point out too, because you remember that movie Alexander with
Oh yeah.
Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
Obviously they were trying to imply that Alexander kind of had a thing for his mother as well, but I couldn't help but see if maybe there was a hint of that Oedipus slash narcissist element in there as well, because obviously we're talking about a man who went on to conquer half of the known world,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But
And yeah. I think that might have been manufactured by Hollywood. I don't think there's any text there that would support that. Uh, so I think it's
right,
more of a loose interpretation.
right, but I just find it so fascinating that they would immediately default to that Oedipus interpretation, to
Yeah.
apply to put in that relationship between Olympia and Alexander. It's like it. What I also find fascinating too, like, do they just assume, well, he's Greek and it's Greek mythology, we'll just like
Yeah.
smush them together? It's kind of it's kind of the equivalent how every foreigner thinks all Americans are like rednecks or they're cowboys,
Yep.
because
Yeah, they're
they're
carrying around their 6 shooters and driving their big trucks. Yep.
yeah, exactly. I mean, y'all probably can't see, but Matt's got like a huge like American flag in his backyard, and he's got like he's got like a tractor and everything, and he's got a sign that says, "We'll shoot on sight."
Right? Basically, like everybody's a cowboy walking around the Wild West out here.
I
Yeah.
I mean, it is California, so.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think for Oedipus, I think what makes him both tragic and heroic is the fact that he in spite of the fact that he is faced with this predestination of what is to come, he
Mhm.
he faces it. He goes into it willingly, like he's going into this very much like a guy running into a burning house. Like it's like, well, I mean, if the cards are
Yeah.
stacked against me, I might as well go down fighting. So
And he didn't kill his children, which were the products of it. So at least he didn't do that. I mean, he didn't
that's true.
compound sin upon sin. Like he didn't go in there and murder his mom. She already committed suicide, obviously, but he didn't murder her.
He did curse his sons. You remember, because
Yeah,
because Polynices comes in and says, "Hey, Dad, can you like help me out? I'm trying to get back into Thebes, and my brother's being a dick." And he's like, "Well, fuck both of you guys."
yeah,
Basically.
yeah. But he didn't kill him. I mean, he just, a little cursing out doesn't do much,
Think about it too, because it comes full circle if you think about it. Because
It does.
he starts off, being cursed, and he ends with inflicting the curse upon his own children.
Yes, he
Um,
does.
but I think, but I think in this case, like it's done, it's done with the full knowledge of what they've become. Whereas, whereas before it's kind of like a Schrodinger's cat kind of situation,
Yep.
with his origin. So I want to move on to the next hero,
Yeah.
Ajax. And for those of y'all who aren't familiar with Ajax, if you don't know who Ajax is, you'll probably know what the Trojan War is. You'll probably know who
Mhm.
Achilles is.
Mhm.
So as we all know, Achilles he was the greatest warrior of the Greeks when they went to Troy and they fought for 10 years.
Mhm.
But what people don't really know is that Ajax, or I think he's referred to as Ajax the Greater in some
Raider.
text,
Yep.
he was very much the second greatest in in the army. And for me, I think that's like I think that's tragic in itself, like to be known as, oh, so you're not as good as Achilles then, but okay. I mean, hey, he's killing Trojans. I mean, what more can you ask for? But
Yeah.
but what we know about Ajax is and I think it comes from Matt, help me out here. Is it Aeschylus
Oh,
who
Aeschylus there.
yeah, who wrote the play Ajax? Because that's
Yeah.
because most of what I know about that story comes from that play where the Greeks decide, after Achilles has been killed, they decide who's going to get his weapons, and Ajax, flexing is like, hey,
Yeah.
now that the greatest is gone, maybe I can get it because I'm the second greatest. Well, I'm the
'Cause
greatest
he,
now.
he actually challenged Hector at a point. Yeah, he didn't win, but he still
Yeah.
challenged Hector to one-on-one, and which, in my opinion, I always thought that always felt sympathy towards him because he was a man of great prowess. He was a man of honor too, and it's not like he was out there like Ajax the Lesser, raping priestesses in the temple and challenging Poseidon.
Yeah, he conducted himself, the way a soldier would conduct himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why, and I always felt like, and I think that's what the audience is supposed to feel, is like we're supposed to feel like this empathy, like yeah, he deserves this, he should have gotten it, not little weakling Odysseus there, who yeah, sure he's the brains of the operation, but but did he really do much at that point?
I mean, but that's the thing. I feel because we've all been in situations where we felt like we should have gotten it right.
Yep.
I mean, the big one that comes to mind, oddly enough, is was a Treehouse of Horror episode where Lisa, expects to represent her class in, I think
Yep.
it was like a spelling bee or something, and it goes to another kid instead, and she gets really really pissed off, and she's plotting to like get even with Miss Hoover. That
Hmm.
that's who Ajax sort of reminds me of, is the fact that this one decision, and again to your point, like it's always that one moment, that one decision that kind of leads to the downfall. It's that one moment where Ajax kind of goes off the deep end, because
He broke, yeah, it broke him.
yeah, and that's what's so fascinating too, is the fact that here's a man who has seen it all and done it all, right? I
Yep.
mean, you would think this is someone who suffers from PTSD, but he just goes right in and does the
Yeah.
job. without any complaint. But that one moment where the council decides, Achilles' weapons are going to go to Odysseus, because I'm still confused about why he gets it, but it is what it is.
It's
It goes
because
to
he's a
Odysseus.
general. That's why, and
He
because of his
outranks him.
household, he outranks them in wealth and noble birth. He outranks them in that society. Basically, Ajax would be the common man, and the common man is always going to lose out to nobility or the people with wealth.
So because from a modern standpoint, we would say that's bullshit.
Mhm.
We're pretty much spoiled by the fact that everybody is equal under the law and everybody has a fair chance to prove themselves. So
But do we? That's the thing about it. It still plays out in our own society. We see individuals who have more wealth are able to get out of other troubles more so than, say, someone who comes from a more impoverished area or a
or from the other side of the
middle
tracks.
income.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where they're more or less going to get punished more severely because they can't afford to uh, gets a high-end lawyer to focus on to win the case, or at least relegate their sentence down. Whereas the wealthy can just buy it off and just keep buying and paying and paying and paying, and until they run out of money, or eventually the law catches up with them, or not.
Yeah.
So, and
Wh-
then in this
wh-
society with Ajax though, it's like he was a hard worker. He's out there looking for his big paycheck. He's like, this is my big bonus, and you overlooked it. I mean, It's a Wonderful Life is like kind of like that too, like looking for that big payout, and then you don't get it. So what's he do?
well, that leads me to another point, and I'm glad you mentioned it, too, is the fact that because we already mentioned with Oedipus that the cards were stacked against him from birth. Like, I
Hmm.
think this is a prophecy that was kind of, that was kind of cemented in the minds of Oedipus's dad, to where it would lead to that fateful, day. In this case, you kind of start to wonder if the same thing is kind of happening for Ajax. And now obviously, he's not dealing with any divine prophecy that kind of
Hmm.
foretells this is what Ajax is going to do. But all the same, in this case, it's more of a it's more of a societal, um
Yeah.
I guess you could say a societal prophecy that kind of is predetermined, against him, to where he can't really he can't really pull himself up. Like, he can kill as many Trojans as he can. He can, you know prove
Yep.
himself. He can be, a
Tear
lion
down
among
the
men.
walls of Troy, and he'll still be.
Right.
He'll never have anything because they'll be like, "Good job." Anyway, all right, Odysseus, you're going to get all the wealth. You're going to get the glory, and we're all going to go home. Yay, happy.
Yeah, exactly. It's and that's what I find so fascinating, is the fact that Ajax, in a way, he's sort of cursed in the same way that Oedipus is from the very beginning,
Hmm.
because all the cards are stacked against him. And I
Yeah.
think that's what makes it so tragic, is the fact that, you know for a society that, and I'm not saying, like, during the classical period, it was well, the mythological period of Greece, it was a democracy that comes later on. But
Yeah.
we have this misunderstanding of seeing the Greeks as, as democratic, as a sort of monolith democratic society through and through. I mean, we forget the fact
No.
that there was a period where they were ruled by kings, and
Yep.
it was pretty much, this is where we are, and this is where you are, and you've got to know your place.
Yep.
Um, so what happens at the end when Ajax, decides to, off himself because of this decision? You, I couldn't help but feel sympathy for Ajax. It's because this is a man who's played by the rules of society. He's carried himself with dignity. He's done what's been asked of him, and he just hasn't been recognized for it.
Yep. You'll never win out, and that's the thing. It's definitely it's the whole. It's like comes down to the ideology of the common man, And yeah, he was a great warrior of great prowess, but because he was more still considered, even though he had a great name to himself, and in a different world, if he would have, I think, honestly though, I think if he would have followed through and didn't off himself and didn't lose his and didn't go crazy with it,
Yeah.
and just said, "Okay, Odysseus, you got this." I think eventually that he may have been rewarded with something. Maybe not like a title per se, but like some sort of, because all the great warriors were rewarded in some ways. If they lived when they get back home. So, uh, but in this case, the worst part was that I think comes down to like Oedipus there and all these other ones. His hubris was so great. Like, I deserve this so much that I'm not getting it. So therefore, my life is over.
Well, to follow your line of logic, so let's assume for a moment he lived through the war. He didn't
Yeah.
die, by his own hands. The question then becomes like, would he have accepted the prize that they were willing to give him, or was he just dead set on getting the prize that he felt he deserved? Because
Yep.
you remember in the Iliad, Agamemnon loses his his prize because
Yes.
her father was a priest and he called on the wrath of Apollo, so he goes and takes Achilles' prize, and that
Yep.
leads to the kerfuffle that we see among the Greeks. I feel like even if Ajax had been offered like something substantial, what we would consider substantial, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Ajax would have allowed himself to accept it, because in his mind it's not the price that he felt he should have deserved,
Yeah. The
right?
honor that, yeah. Which I also think that that's another thing. It's a representation of what the armor and weaponry all represents. There is like this
Right,
respect.
right.
And I think definitely he was disrespected. Um, so, and it's just like, how a lot of people, when they feel like disrespected at work, yeah, sometimes they just don't want to work as hard, or they'll leave and go somewhere else. Well, obviously he couldn't leave. He couldn't be like, well, you're not supporting me. I'm gonna go join the Trojans over here.
Right. They know what you look like, Ajax. um
You're a very distinguishable character. Sorry.
I was gonna say, like, I was gonna say, the thing that I find most tragic is the fact that we know his name because of a cleaning detergent.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I was thinking about that too.
Yeah.
A cleaning product, and then we also had like a movie studio took it on for a minute, and then like it's just been like, and all relegated to second tier stuff too.
Yeah. So that actually leads me to representation in media, because we really don't see that much of Ajax apart from that. I think a few scenes from the movie Troy, and he's just this
Yep.
big guy running around with a hammer, just smashing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of get the feeling that he's more of a berserker than he is, a Greek warrior, because
You're right. Yeah.
I mean, like with Greek warriors, they're very much, say whatever you want about them, they at least kind of carry themselves, in a certain way, kind of like what you would see with, like, modern military people.
Hmm.
But I feel like they could have done more with Ajax. They could have made him a far more complex character, because the Ajax
Yes.
that we see in the plays, I mean, as much as you want to laugh at his antics after he loses his mind, you can understand where he's coming from. You
Oh
can
yeah.
sympathize with him.
Yeah, because everybody's lost out to somebody, to someone or something. They didn't get that promotion. So and so got it over that. I mean, I think we see that now happening in modern films where so and so's like oversaw for a promotion, but rather than go into the madness when they bring their own downfall, we see it twisted into more of a revenge type film. Like, oh, I'm going to get back at you and your boss.
Like Othello, for instance. Othello is a really, really good example, because Iago kind of takes that, and instead of internalizing it, he kind of decides to take it out on the person who got the promotion instead. You know, it would be very interesting to see how Ajax would have dealt with Odysseus right there, if he kind of you know did what Iago did to Othello. But
Right. Yeah. I don't think, but he's not clever enough. And I think, yeah, the thing Ajax would, he's the hammer and the shield to Odysseus's brains. So that's why I don't think that he could come up with that, and he lacked the imagination to go beyond self harm.
yeah, and that's another thing too, is the fact that there's this. there's a sort of strong delineation between character tropes. Like
Mm,
you're either this, you're either the clever dick, or you're the big dumb brute who basically does
yep.
everything. You're basically Moose, basically, who's being
Yeah.
told, "Hey, go do this, and don't come back until you've done it." Um, but I'm totally with you. I think the tragedy of Ajax is the fact that he's basically us. He's
Yes.
basically the guy in the trenches who, you know, punches his time card at 9, sticks a little bit after 5 because he wants to get, his work done, and he does it properly. And to your point, you know, and I'll even take a quote from The Dark Knight.
Oh
There
yeah.
you remember that scene at the end where Alfred is burning the letter from Rachel because
Yeah.
Rachel tells Bruce she's not going to marry him, she's going to marry Harvey. And you hear that
Yeah.
voiceover where Batman is basically saying sometimes people deserve to have their faith rewarded.
Yeah.
And and I think that applies in a way to Ajax because he believed, like, with his heart, all of his heart of hearts, that this prize was going to be his and that he deserved it. And I would say rightly so. Like, this is a man
Yep.
who rose through the ranks, who literally bled for his
Yep.
people, and this is how he ends up. And what's even more disturbing is the fact that that the council decides, well, maybe
Yeah.
we should just chuck his body out and let the carrions have him.
Yeah, he doesn't even get. Yeah, he doesn't even get a proper burial. I mean, they almost like say, "Well, let his spirit walk the rest of the wander the earth, rest of the days. Who cares?" It doesn't matter. It goes back to the whole social class of, you could work your days for somebody and then end up in a pauper's grave.
And and that's what pisses me off, is the fact that we're talking about someone whose merits would dwarf any of the top brass,
Mm-hmm.
and yet this is what he's been reduced to. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're having a debate now. Thankfully, Odysseus, is man enough to say, "Well, hold on
Yeah.
a second. Maybe let's not go that route." I mean, remember, he did do some things, and we aren't animals. I mean,
Yeah.
we got to look
Basically.
after him on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
I think if Oedipus is tragic because he was a victim of circumstance, like he couldn't escape the fate against him. I
Yeah.
think I think you and I can both agree that Ajax he's basically a tragic figure for the common man, like for us.
Yeah. So yeah, he is a reflection of what happens in society.
And
And
to your point, this is something that's still happening. It's not like
yeah.
it's been relegated to myth. I mean, and it's sad too because Matt, you're a writer, so I want to pick your brain on this one. Like,
Mhm.
if you were to write an adaptation of Ajax as a character for modern audiences, how would you go about doing that? Would you still make him the soldierly type who does what he does for his country and is never appreciated, kind of like the Rambo character,
I'm more or
or do you go
less.
over a different
I would.
approach?
It would modernize him, make him more like a union leader, someone who rallies the people together against the big bad corporations who
Mhm.
are trying to create harm, only to be betrayed by his own people, especially like those who like he may work and in this industry and help build this industry, and but only to be betrayed by the people that he's building it for. So I'd put him at more like a union type leader.
As you were saying that, it reminded me of Jeremy Corbyn. You remember the former labor leader in the UK?
Yeah.
Ajax sort of reminds me of Corbyn because Corbyn, for a brief moment in time, was the leader of the opposition.
Yeah.
He was very much a man, because you could tell he was very much a man who cared about doing what was best for Britain. But at the end of the day, he gets kicked out of the Labor Party. He's got no
Yep. They
party at
eat him
all.
up. They
Yeah,
eat him up.
they
Hmm.
chewed him out on charges of anti-Semitism and everything, and
Oh yeah.
now he's just left out in the cold.
Yep.
Um, Gosh, there's so many examples like I could think of. Like, we could be doing this all day, man. Um, but I want to
Yeah.
move on. I want to move on to our last hero, Bellerophon, and if you don't know who Bellerophon is, I don't blame you. Um, but
It's
if
not
but if y'all
common.
but if you know the story of Pegasus, then then you'll be familiar with Bellerophon's story once we get to it. Now, this one I had to do a lot of scrubbing on the internet to see if there was anything close to it, and I couldn't find anything.
Nope.
And what's so fascinating is the fact that this is a guy who played a crucial role in bringing a very famous, animal into into the imaginations of storytellers, throughout the
Oh yeah.
ages, and yet we don't know anything about him. Um, the only thing, I mean, really, the only tragic thing about him is the fact that after he tames Pegasus, he kind of gets this idea into his head. He's going to fly all the way to Mount Olympus to
Oh
basically
yeah.
join the ranks of the gods, and he gets thrown off and killed as a result. Now, I just want to piggyback off what you were saying earlier about Ajax. I feel like if Ajax was sort of like a cog in the machine who kind of gets tossed aside, I
Hmm.
would I would look at Bellerophon as the character who's like, you know, I'm gonna rise up. I'm gonna try to take what is mine,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Like I deserve to be. I did this amazing feat, so now I deserve to be one of you. And they look at him like,
yeah,
okay,
exactly.
whoop. Bye. And even the fall didn't kill him. He still wandered around all maimed and like bitter and broken to the end of the days. I mean, that's even insult to injury or injury to insult. Okay, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Injury to insult, because well, that's another thing. That's another thing too, because throughout this entire entire episode, we talk about how each of these heroes and they've been plagued by hubris, and I think. And I think in Bellerophon's case, this is probably the biggest case of them all. Like, we're
yeah,
talking about a man who wants to be a god, who literally wants to be a god,
yep.
which why he attempts this. But what I find
Oop. Did I lose you?
are aspirations, really.
Oops, hang on. I think I lost you for a second. Try this. You there?
Yeah, it's a beautiful day
Okay.
where you are, by the way. It's horrible
I
where
lost
we
your
are right
signal.
now.
Oh
No, you're
yeah.
good. You're good.
Okay.
But
Yeah. No, I was like, I heard you like cut in and then cut out. Yeah. No, he is definitely interesting figure. It's kind of like the whole ideology of like, let's see how far I can push this, and let's see if I can rise completely above the mortal station there. Like the whole ideology of like Icarus, like, hey, let's see if we could fly. Literally, he was flying,
yeah,
but
exactly.
you
But
know,
but that's the thing, because because the gods, well, in case the gods kind of have to let them know, hey, know your place. This is
yep,
where you are, and you can't rise above it. Which I always found fascinating, because as much as I found Bellerophon's hubris to be a bit, you know, distasteful, because he did try to make himself a
yeah,
god. I in a way I could also sympathize where he was coming from, because he did feel like he wanted something more, and he was willing to go out and get it. Now what happened to him? Obviously, he kind of got his just desserts, but at the same time, it's like, haven't we all been there before, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like the gods are like the whole aristocrats of society, and he's just another little plebe. And they're all like, "Oh, you want to become one of us? Well, too bad, you can't. Because if you do this, then everybody else is going to want to do the same thing. They're all going to want to try to become one of us. And you know what? There can't be one of us because we need more of you.
Right, more of you to take advantage of and give us
Exactly.
worship.
Yep. We.
So it reminds me of those it reminds me of those period pieces that I used to watch way back in the day. Um in shows like Downton Abbey, for instance,
Mm,
where these blue bloods who have been in power for years and years, and
mm-hmm.
they have titles to their names, and yet what's so ironic and hilarious is the fact that that in spite of the fact that they're impoverished now and that they can't really rub 2 cents together, and that their only recourse is to marry someone who's nouveau riche, someone who
Yep.
they would consider below them, they still have the audacity and the gall to say, I I really don't know how I feel about this. Like, you are a blue blood, and yet you're a nouveau riche, sorry, and yet
Yep.
they depend on their money because they don't have anything left to to sort of support themselves. So I kind of feel like with Bellerophon, he kind of represents the possibility of what of what could happen if
Yeah.
if the ordinary man kind of rose up and kind of made a name for themselves. And if you think about, that's what we saw over the past probably like the past few hundred years, where
Oh
you
yeah.
know where like regular people like Carnegie and Edison and Ford, these were just middle of the road kind of guys, and they made names for themselves. They built huge empires, right?
Well, they built it on stealing from other people. I mean, basically, it's
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
and
But we'll
and that's what
gloss
he was
over
trying
that.
to do too. He was trying to build his reputation off of stealing, the horse, and say Pegasus there, and say, "Hey, you look at me! I'm literally zooming up to you to the sky."
So, so that's another thing too, because out of all of the heroes that we've discussed so far, Bellerophon is, is one of those that we don't really hear that much about.
No,
What? Why is that? Why has Bellerophon been scrubbed from the public imagination?
because I think is that he is more distasteful, and just because the ideology of that someone beneath is trying to become like one of the gods above, or like one of the new aristocrats, or and just someone who has no power, just in the skill and ability to do amazing feats, deserves to be of someone who's born in that situation there because the gods chose them, or they're gods themselves.
Hmm.
So I think that more or less that he is not tragic enough, not like Icarus, who is a warning of if you fly too high, you're gonna melt and fall, and then or father that pushes the sun too high will cause his demise, and the father will be forever, impoverished and forever in sorrow. So,
So the lessons with Bellerophon aren't that relevant.
or
Is that what you're saying, or?
it doesn't echo as much now with our society because everybody wants to rise up. Everybody wants to. I mean, we could see that. I mean, we could push this mythos to make it that way because it's more like what really happens in reality than all some of the other ones. Like, look at I've done this amazing feat, and then someone's gonna come along and like patent it, or buy your patent from you, and take the project as your own. I mean, like it's Elon Musk, Elon
Yeah.
Musk goes around and he buys people's products, doesn't create them. Whereas this guy, he's like, look at me, I did this amazing thing. I could do more amazing things. But they're like, nope.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing too, because as I mentioned earlier, I mean, he's very much associated with the myth of Pegasus, but we know more about Pegasus than him,
Yeah,
and even
no,
then,
it's sad.
and even then, Pegasus is associated with different heroes than Bellerophon, which
Yep.
which to your point is adding insult to injury.
Yep.
Um,
Clash of the Titans. That's what that movie basically just ripped that out of his hands and said, nope, sorry, it does no longer belongs to you. Now it belongs to Theseus.
yep, and
So,
Perseus goes and
Perseus, yeah.
yeah, Perseus gets the credit as being the one who finds Pegasus and uses him to defeat the Kraken.
Yep.
Um, but I feel like I feel like even if they never go around to making a myth about Bellerophon, I think Bellerophon would kind of be like that
Yeah.
sort of like that unspoken that thing we don't speak about, but we all know it's there and it's true because I mean because think about it. I mean, we have seen examples in history where people have finally decided enough is enough. We're going to take what's ours. Um,
Yep.
I mean, French Revolution. Anybody?
Yeah.
Russian Revolution. I mean,
Yep.
even something as recent as the fall
Going
of
against
Charles
the
Dud.
Yep. I
So
mean, that's the thing about it is that's why they try to spin new narratives. They're trying to spin a narrative of you are in your position because you need to be there. So, and if you try to rise up, we're going to crush you and make you suffer.
right, and I think not only is that tragic, but it's also very relevant, and the
Yeah.
relevancy of it is tragic in itself because we know that it's something that's always going to continue, regardless of whatever the social attitudes are, today
Yep.
or 20 years from now. Um, so Matthew, if if you were if someone were to ask you out of these three heroes, which one would you find the most fascinating, and which one would you definitely want to add to the narrative in terms of their mythology, who would it be?
I mean, Ajax is a character that we can always continue to explore. We could explore like the whole what ifs. Like, what if that he didn't kill himself? What if instead that he accepted his fate and then tried to work around it, only to find out that he wasn't ever going to gain anything due to his social status. So, what would he do next? Would
Mhm.
he create a rebellion against the kings, or would he um, be just fall down and be continue to be broken and just wander his days? You see that happening in different novels. You get that character who was a war hero who comes home and nothing's the same.
Right.
So, and there's no accolades for him. There's nothing. It's just that he goes back to his life. And then they find out, oh, the tax man wants money, and the landlord wants rent, and it's just everybody wants something from him, even though he gave everything.
Yeah, it's kind of like that John Rambo kind of.
Yeah,
I would even go as far as to say Rambo is probably the best adaptation of the Ajax story in modern filmmaking or
yeah,
modern culture, if you think about it. And I forget which one it was. I think it might have been either First Blood or the second Rambo movie, where John Rambo turns and says, "Those men over there, I want what they want." And
yep,
in other words, the praise and accolades that they should have gotten when they came back from Nam. That's what
yep.
he wants. He doesn't want any of the money or riches or anything like that. And I think, and I think at the end of the day, I think, and this is just me speaking here. I don't think Ajax really wanted the armor in itself, because what he's wearing is pretty sufficient. And you hinted at this too. It's what the armor represents. It's the
Hmm.
accolades. It's the praise. Um, in that, and I think, and I think what Rambo said in that movie pretty much encapsulates what Ajax probably would have been thinking when he made a bid for Achilles' armor. So
Definitely, yeah. And it's like even Rocky films are very similar too. See,
yes, exactly,
yeah, it's
exactly.
a broken man in here trying to find redemption, find some meaning in everything.
I think
And when he
I was gonna say maybe there's a good argument for Sylvester Stallone playing Ajax.
no, no, no. He's pretty good. He's pretty done as an actor. Uh, Especially, I think his recent film, people like panned it.
Well, he did Tulsa King. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But Matt, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to be on this episode. I would really love to have you come back for future episodes, especially mythological related. So thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you for having me on. I mean, I always enjoy discussing mythology and even in our modern world, how everything still applies.
Oh, believe me, I have plenty more ideas. So we'll definitely talk after the new year. But I just want to thank everybody for taking time to watch this episode. If you're enjoying the content, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.